Okay, so this PowerPoint is going to cover 7.8 to 7.11 in grammar and context. So if you want to open up your book, we're going to be starting off on page 228. Okay. So here's the first table on 228. This is the difference, or this is we're talking about was and we're going to. Now was going to or were going to, this is a past tense form. But if we remember from an earlier chapter when we talked about the future tense, that be going to in the future means one of the things it means is a definite plan for the future. So it has a similar meaning in the past tense, except it has the added meaning of there was a plan, but that plan did not happen. So Einstein was going to return to Germany, but the Nazis came to power. That means that he had the plan to go back to Germany, but he didn't go back to Germany. So this was going to or were going to means a plan that didn't happen in the past. So if I were to just say, if I said Einstein went, or sorry, Einstein returned to Germany, it means that, that he did it. But when I say was going to, what it means is that there was a plan, but it didn't happen. Pardon me. So here's some exercises that you can use for practice, and on the next slide I'll show you the answers. So if you want to pause the video and go through these and see what your answers are, I'll go over the answers in the next slide. Okay, so let's look at the first one. Is Dave coming to our party? He was going to come, but he couldn't find a babysitter for his kids. So was going to come, he planned to come, but he couldn't find a babysitter for his kids. So there's a form here that we haven't talked about. The past tense of can is could. That's why we changed that one. Let's look at the next one. Are you making dinner tonight? I was going to make it until the power went out. There's a mistake in there. I apologize for that. But I had a plan to make dinner, but then the power went out. There was no more electricity, so I didn't. Is your daughter going to college? She was going to go, but she decided to take a year off and travel first. So she had the plan to go to college, but she changed her mind. Is the teacher going to stay after class? He was going to stay, but he found out he had a meeting to go to later. So the plan was to stay, but there was a change in the plan. Are your neighbors going to sell their house? They were going to sell until the real estate market crashed. So the plan was to sell, but then something happened to make them not sell. Are you going to buy a new computer? Well, I was going to buy a new iMac until I lost my job. So there was a plan to buy, but then they lost their job, or the person lost his job. What are Jim and Victoria doing tonight? They were going to see a movie, but instead they made reservations at a restaurant. So the plan was to see the movie, but then they changed the plan. Okay? So we'll do more practice of that in class. So moving on to page 229, this is table 7.9. It's the same one in your book. And what we're talking about is the difference between using when with the simple past and with the past continuous. So one of the things we talked about last class was the difference between the simple past and the past continuous. So when we're using them with these when clauses, we said that the simple past is the shorter activity and the past continuous is a longer activity. And that's still true here, but what we want to explain here is what's the difference between choosing to use the past continuous or choosing to use the present continuous. So let's look at the examples here. So when Einstein graduated from college, he tried to get a job as a teacher. So in this case, we have the past tense in the when clause, graduated, and we also have the past tense in the main clause, tried. And what this means is that the main clause happened second. So in this case, when Einstein graduated from college, that's the thing that happened first. He tried to get a job as a teacher. That's the thing that happened second. But let's look at the same kind of sentence, but using the past continuous. So we say, when Einstein entered college, he was living in Switzerland. Now the difference in this is that when you use the past continuous in the main clause, it shows that what happened at the same time as the action. So when Einstein entered college, he was living in Switzerland. Both things were happening at the same time. They're both happening at the same time. So let's look at another example here. Einstein came to live in the U.S. when he lost his German citizenship. Now this is a little bit tricky because it flips the order from A. But the thing that happened first is that he lost his German citizenship. So the thing in the time clause, or in this case the when clause, is what happened first. And the second thing that happened is that he came to live in the United States, or in the U.S. And let's look at D. Einstein was living in the U.S. when he died. So in this case, his living in the U.S. and his dying both happened at the same time. So that's the difference between the simple past and the past continuous. So let's take a look at this. These are actually activities that are taken from exercise number 1. And I just, let's see, I think I just did the first 5. But go ahead and do these ones, and then pause the video, and then I'll come back and I'll explain each one on the next slide. Okay, so let's look at this first one, and this was the example in the book. It says Terrence was living in the refugee camp when he got his visa. These two things happened at the same time. When he got to the U.S., he needed to find a job. So in this case, the first thing that happened was he got to the U.S., and the second thing that happened was his needing to get a job. When he got permission, he left Zambia. So the first thing that happened was getting permission, and the second thing that happened was leaving Zambia. He was working in a hospital when he heard the news. So this is the past continuous, which means both things happened at the same time. He was working in the hospital, and at the same time he heard the news. When they arrived in the U.S., volunteers helped them. So the first thing that happened is that they arrived in the U.S., and the second thing that happened is that the volunteers helped them. When they arrived in the U.S., a volunteer was waiting for them at the airport. So in this case, the things happened both at the same time. They arrived, and at the same time that they arrived, a volunteer was waiting for them at the airport. Okay, and we will finish off those activities in class and discuss those more. All right, so this is page 230. This is the 7.10, the simple past versus the past continuous. So let's look at the difference in the meanings between these two. The things that we've already talked about is that we said that when we have the simple past and the past continuous together, the simple past is the shorter of the term of the events, and the past continuous is the longest. The second thing is, we said the difference between the two of them is that when we use the simple past tense in a when clause, it means that event happened first. When we use the simple past in the main clause, it means that that event happened second. But when we use the past continuous in the main clause, it means that that event happened at the same time. So let's look at these ones. So here we're using the word while instead of when. And while has the meaning of at the same time. So let's look at these examples. So A says, while they lived in a refugee camp, they studied English. So in this case, both of these things are in the simple past tense. And the simple past tense is used in both clauses to show two past actions that happened in the same time period. Okay? So let's look at the next one. While I was reading the story about Terence and Charlotte, I was underlining the verbs. Now in this case, the past continuous is used in both of the clauses to show two past actions that happened at the exact same time period. So the difference between the first one and the second one is that when we're using the simple past, we're saying generally it's the same time period, but when we use the past continuous, we're saying it's at exactly the same time period. It was happening exactly together. Then C, we're using when here. When they got permission, they came to the U.S. So when we use when for a specific time here. Now that's not the greatest example there. Let's move on and look at some practice. So this is exercise 16 on page 231. So if you want to go ahead and answer it, what you need to do is you want to fill in the blank with when for an action that's at a specific time, and use while for an action that continues over time. Okay? So when we talk about when, what we mean is that that's something that happened once. And when we're talking about while, we're talking about something that's happening over time. Okay? Okay, so let's look at the answers here. So number one says, when Terence left his country, he went to Congo. He left his country is an event that didn't happen over a long period of time. It was at a specific time. With while, number two, while I was reading the story, I was paying attention to the verbs. So this is over a period of time, right? Reading the story is something that takes a while, and paying attention is also something that takes a while. So while Charlotte cleaned hotel rooms, she listened to music. So the cleaning of the hotel rooms, that's a thing that takes a period of time. She listened to music. So if we were to compare 2 and 3, they're both using while, but in 2, what we're saying is that those two things, reading the story and paying attention, were happening at the exact same time. But when we're saying cleaned rooms and listen to music, what we're saying is that they're happening in the same period. So there may be a point when she was cleaning the rooms where she wasn't listening to the music. Okay, is the difference between the two of those. Number 4, when their youngest daughter was born, Charlotte stopped working. Okay, the birth of the daughter is a specific time. It's a specific event. Okay. It's not something that's over a period of time. Charlotte started to work again when her daughter was a year old. Okay, again, a specific time. Becoming a year, your birthday, right, is a specific time. While Charlotte worked, her baby was in daycare. Okay, so again, this is over a period of time. Terence worked in a factory while Charlotte worked in a hotel. So these things are happening both at the same period of time. One is not specific and one is not, one is not specific. Okay? Right, so moving on to the last one. This is about using the ing form, okay, and this is called the gerund form of a verb. Now, one thing that I want to say about this, I know that there's a lot of colors here, and I hope that that's helpful, not hurtful. But one of the reasons why you want to learn how to use gerunds is so that you can have more variety in your writing. Because if everything is if every one of your sentences is subject verb, it can get a little bit boring. So the reason why we're studying this is just to add variety to your writing. Okay? So let's look at the examples here. So the first one says, Einstein left high school before he finished his studies. Okay. This is a complex sentence. The subordinating conjunction is before. The second one says Einstein left high school before finishing his studies. Now, in this case, what we're using is we're using the gerund finishing. And when I say the word gerund, what I mean is the ing form of the verb. Okay? And when we have that ing form of the verb by itself, it's actually a noun. It plays as a noun. So the next one says, after Einstein left high school, he studied mathematics and physics. After leaving high school, Einstein studied mathematics and physics. Now, the important thing that you need to keep in mind when you're making these changes is that what you're going to do in the dependent clause, so in the first one, the dependent clause is before he finished his studies, and in the second one, the dependent clause is after Einstein left high school. Okay? What you're going to do is you're going to remove the subject, which is in blue, and you're going to change the verb to the ing form. Okay? If the subject, the name of the subject is in the first one, so like after Einstein left high school, you would need to change the subject in the main clause. So if you see in the second one, it says originally it's after Einstein left high school, he studied mathematics and physics. But in the second one, we say after leaving high school, Einstein, not he, Einstein studied mathematics and physics. So let's look at some practice for this. Okay, and this is exercise 17. So go ahead and pause this and do the exercise 17. Okay? Alright, so let's go over these ones. So the first one is Einstein passed an exam before entering college. So in this one, you removed the he and you changed entered into entering. He left high school before receiving his degree. So in this one, we removed he and we changed received into receiving. Number 3. After developing his theory of relativity, Einstein became famous. So in this one, we removed the word Einstein, we changed the verb developed into developing, and we changed the he in the main clause to Einstein. Number 4, he became interested in physics after receiving books on science. So in this case, we removed the he and we changed received to receiving. Number 5, after coming to the U.S., Einstein got a job at Princeton. So in this case, we removed Einstein, we changed the verb came to coming, and we changed he in the main clause to Einstein. Before coming to the U.S., Terrence and Charlotte lived in Zambia. And if you guys pay close attention, you'll notice I forgot to put a comma after the U.S. That's a mistake on my part, -1 point. So what we did in this one is we removed the word they, and we changed came to coming. While living in the refugee camp, the children didn't go to school. So we removed the word they, and we changed lived to living. Number 8, Charlotte listened to music while cleaning rooms. So we removed the word she, and we changed cleaned to cleaning.